Apparently, Jeff Sessions' Justice Department is starting a new civil rights movement. They're investigating whether affirmative action policies in colleges discriminate against white students. And they're using the money from the Civil Rights Division to do it. So, is affirmative action racist against white people?
No, there was a systematic racism that remains today in this country, and if we want to catch up after decades of people starting in a staggered way and not playing on a fair ground, you have to do this to allow diversity, because it benefits everyone to have diverse communities. And you're talking about college campuses. The idea that they not only are doing this, but they're taking it from the Civil Rights Division is like so disturbing to me.
They're making a statement, aren't they? I mean, that's
well, it's like a double slap in the face.
They're making a statement about the values of this administration.
Yeah, I struggle with this, and I even mentioned to Sunny before the show that I even struggle with how to talk about it, because I'm not a minority race. And
well, we did do that 23andMe on the show.
That's true.
And you have some North African and Spanish, so don't speak too soon.
When people look at me, yeah, it's true. When people look at me, the assumption is, okay, this is a white girl that's about to make the statement, and I get it. That's what I look like. But I always wonder. I remember growing up with an Asian American friend, and she came from a very poor family, and I had many people around me that were from very poor families that happened to be white, Asian, whatever. They weren't African American, they weren't Hispanic, and they weren't privy to some of these affirmative action conditions that would enable them to get what they felt was more of a priority treatment or whatnot. And I remember having to sit with myself and say, is someone's race a morally justifiable reason to give them a benefit over another person? And I personally struggle with that, and it's a hard conversation to have. But tell me, talk to me, Sunny, particularly from a legal perspective. Why is it okay? What do you say then to a poor white kid or a poor? What do you say?
First, I need to stop you. You know that affirmative action was for women.
Yes.
Because women weren't accepted, and it was for Asian folks and folks of different. It wasn't just black people. Let's be really clear about that. So if your friend didn't know that she was part of who affirmative action was for, then that's her loss, because affirmative action was to make sure that women got the ability to go to the colleges that they wanted to go to that maybe weren't women friendly.
Yeah.
As far as people of color, because the discrimination was so extensive that we had to make colleges just for black people so we could go to college, you know, so that the schools that maybe other folks wanted to go to, you couldn't get into because of your color. Also, if you were Jewish, you had an issue getting into schools. So this, you know, this was about taking a system that seemed only to work for one group, white men, that's what seemed to work for, and say, this is no longer acceptable, we have to open it up. So a lot of people benefited from affirmative action, but the only people anyone ever talks about, because it's easier to get pissed off about us getting something that people think we shouldn't be getting, is to say, you know, well, black folks benefit, everybody benefits.
Do you feel, though, and I hear that point, I absolutely hear that, especially from a historical perspective, but do you feel that in today's world, that still needs to exist?
Well, that's the question, right?
I want to hear.
Well, do you really think that the playing field is even?
No, but I also don't think I also don't think the playing field is even for privileged white people versus poor white folks that come from a neighborhood. I don't think that's an even playing field.
There is a difference between poverty and race.
Right, so that's what I'm asking you to...
And I'll give that to you. I think that the white student from Appalachia should also benefit, and they are.
Yes,
part of it.
Financial also.
Exactly. And so, you know, the question that we all need to ask ourselves, which is, I think, the question that Sarah was posing, are we at this evil playing field? Are we where we want to be as a society? And I think the resounding question is no. And that's why you still need the affirmative action. And the Supreme Court has made it very clear that it's a holistic approach that these universities are looking at. They're looking at poverty.
Yes.
They're looking at diversity. They're looking at...
And that's a myth. Go ahead, baby.
I was going to say that I think that we're in a period in history that we have to be very vigilant.
Yes.
Because there are assaults on all sorts of civil rights going on during this Trump administration.
Yeah.
For example, they've attacked sexual assaults on campuses. They don't quite think that that's an issue. Transgenders in the military, we heard that last week about how they suddenly want to discriminate against soldiers who are transgender. Access to voting. I mean, the voter ID laws. I mean, making old people who don't drive show a picture ID. They don't have a picture ID. Discrimination protections for gay employees. This is something that came out this week. What is happening is there seems to be a systematic eroding of civil rights that we in this country have been working for since World War II.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is when we look at our representatives in the government right now, and we say, when we look at that people that first addressed the health care, oh, this was a room full of white men. Until our representation is reflective of our population, we haven't caught up yet. So when you look at women in executive positions, you know, whether it's any person of color in different things, until we can kind of play catch up for what we've done as a nation for centuries, we set them back. So now it's time to bring people forward.
Women, you know, listen, remember, maybe I'd say remember, but you won't because you weren't born. But the women's movement, one of the issues about the women's movement was they said, listen, we want this ceiling broken. We've been working our behinds off. First of all, to be a woman and to get a credit card if you weren't married was difficult. To be a woman and get anything on your own.
To vote.
That was just the 60s you're talking about.
I'm just talking about the 60s.
Yeah.
But, you know, to be able to get anything going, I mean, that's part of the reason women just said, this is enough is enough.
You also didn't have women in the workforce. And then now as they're entering...
You had women in the workforce, but they had to act like they were dudes.
And
well, you had certain jobs available to them.
And they're still not making as much money as men. And I think the President Obama said it the best. We're a country that can't guarantee outcomes, but we can guarantee an equal shot. And we need to guarantee that.
The way you're describing it to me sounds like when you talk about a holistic approach, I understand that. I agree with you 100%. But a lot of times I feel like when this debate happens, suddenly, immediately, and through it all, it becomes about race.
Well, that's
and it's
because
not.
that's why I'm saying
that. Right. That's why I was asking.
Because it's never been. Go ahead, John.
But you know what I was going to say? This country is based on systemic racism, starting with slavery and then Jim Crow. That has to be addressed. It's in the process of being addressed.
And the easiest way
it's never going to be equal until that is addressed.
The easiest
and that's what Affirmative Action tries to do.
Way to upset white people is to say black teenage girls are wasting money on welfare. That gets people all riled up. You say, oh, it's just black people who went and took the easy way and got affirmative. The minute you make it about race, they don't have to. They don't have to actually tell you what's really going on. You know, because if you're trying to just make your point, that's the starting place for most people. But I think lots of people have actually done their homework about affirmative action.
No question.
And realize that
55% of white people that were what are these polled? They're polled were in favor of affirmative action. Now, granted, there were like 84% of black people were in favor of it, but the majority of Americans understand that the playing field is not level, and that
54%. A lot of those folks
are women.
Benefited. You know, benefited from it because it benefited those who were being left behind.
Why is it that we can have this conversation though, and it's so hard for politicians to do what just happened?
We'll be right back.